Suho regarded the sword with a measured gaze, addressing the voice within. It's not that I don't understand your perspective, he began. But my father defeated the other monarchs to protect this world. His only goal was to shield it from destruction. In the same way, aren't you here to guard this place from invaders? Whatever side we stand on, we're both simply defending what matters to us. You wish to fight me purely because of our blood connection, but that seems pointless if your mission is to defend this sanctuary. He paused, then added, I want nothing more than to meet my parents, those whom I can't see because of past invasions. For that purpose, I'm willing to draw on any strength. When the Iterum come again, even this place won't remain safe. If you aid me, together we can protect both this sanctuary and our world. The spirit within the sword fell silent, contemplating Suho's unexpected proposition. Could this young heir of the Shadow Lord truly mean to join forces? Suho grasped the sword's hilt firmly, waiting to see if it would submit to his resolve, prepared to unite shadows and fangs in a common cause. For a moment, an aura of understanding seemed to pass between them, as though the sword were weighing Suho's words deeply. Meanwhile, in a bustling cafe, a group of reporters gathered with several of Suho's friends, eager for any first-hand account of the previous day's harrowing dungeon incident. They had been keen to speak to anyone who could give them the full story, and one of the survivors, Lim Dog-yoon, who still bore signs of exhaustion, took the opportunity to share his experience. Holding his coffee, he addressed the reporters, wanting to bring attention to Suho's bravery, despite his rank as an E-class hunter. It's important people hear what happened, Lim said. He detailed how Suho had stepped forward without hesitation to protect the others, painting a picture of courage that would be hard to overlook. The reporters listened closely, capturing every word to relay in the next headline. Not long after, articles began circulating, highlighting the unlikely hero, a rank E hunter who had shielded his fellow hunters from certain doom. The reports recounted Suho's selfless stand against the dungeon monsters, featuring interviews from many survivors who owed their lives to him. Elsewhere, editors and writers gathered to discuss their next steps, pens tapping thoughtfully as they selected the best story angles to bring this extraordinary event to the public. Suho's resolve had begun to echo far beyond the dungeon walls, giving rise to a story of heroism that would inspire many more. In a bustling guild management office, murmurs filled the room as the team discussed recent staffing needs. One of the assistants noted that the intel department was short-handed and would benefit from hiring a few additional E-rank hunters. The second-in-command, seated at the main desk, quickly agreed, instructing his colleague to find a suitable candidate. The man at the computer scanned through profiles, stopping at one that caught his attention, an E-rank hunter who had recently faced down monsters in a dungeon, coordinated the evacuation of a minor team, and single-handedly rescued an injured hunter. Upon realizing the candidate's rank, those around him were visibly surprised. But the second-in-command merely shrugged, assuring them, "Don't be so quick to judge. Bringing him into a high-ranking guild like ours could be beneficial. It wouldn't hurt to have him here and resolve a minor scandal or two." A staffer then inquired if Hunter Suho had responded to their initial outreach. The mention of Suho's name drew interest, particularly because they had learned he'd received an invitation from the prestigious Black Turtles Guild. He must be thrilled, one of them assumed. However, the colleague at the desk turned, stating, "Actually, Suho declined the offer." The second-in-command blinked in disbelief. Declined? An E-rank rookie refusing a guild like that? What's he thinking? He shook his head, grumbling. Does he believe he's some kind of S-rank hunter? It doesn't make any sense. Another staffer chimed in. Apparently, Suho has no interest in joining any guild. The leader's irritation deepened, unable to grasp how a rookie with such a low rank could afford to pass up such opportunities. "Mark my words, he'll come around," he muttered. "Sooner or later, Suho will realize how challenging it is to survive without a guild support." Meanwhile, back at his apartment, Suho checked the notifications popping up on his phone. Since his last dungeon expedition, he had been inundated with guild invitations. A flood of offers filled Suho's inbox, though he noticed that nearly every guild wanted him for menial roles as a porter or gatherer. He couldn't quite understand the overwhelming interest, but he dismissed the offers. To him, joining these guilds would only limit his potential and slow his progress with the system. There was simply no reason to waste time on tasks that would sidetrack his path to growth. Turning his focus to his sword, Suho looked at Fong Raken. "About what we discussed in the dungeon," he began, combining Shadow and Fong. "Are you still open to that?" Fong Raken's voice responded skeptically, clearly stunned. "Are you serious? You think a Shadow can become a true ally and not an adversary?" After a pause, he added, "But there is one condition, take me to another of the Fong monarch's sacred lands." Suho raised an eyebrow. "You know where to find it?" Fong Raken replied confidently, I know the locations of all the Fang monarch's holy sites, regardless of distance. But there's a problem, a gate leading to one of them has already vanished. It's most likely undergone a dungeon breach. Realization struck Suho. This holy ground must now be an open dungeon, a place where vicious, powerful monsters roam freely. Once a breach forms, creatures spill out, transforming the area into a desolate wasteland. Gripping his phone, Suho quickly messaged his uncle, saying he'd be unreachable for a while and not to worry. He knew he needed to seize this chance to gain strength and elevate his level as rapidly as possible. Later, Suho glanced over at Beru, asking if they were close. Beru nodded. Yes, we're here. But in the parking lot, they immediately spotted signs prohibiting entry. Suho noticed that the Hyena Guild, a notorious group known for recruiting former gang members, had claimed the area, adding a layer of tension. Understanding that a direct approach might be met with hostility, Suho steeled himself, ready for whatever awaited him beyond the barrier. Beru advised Suho to ignore the petty creatures and focus on leveling up. As Beru and Fang bickered, Suho cut them off, irritated, demanding to know what they were doing. He stated he was ready to break in and would use his powers to make it happen. With that, he began shattering the surveillance cameras one by one. Beru questioned what would happen if the guild noticed, but Suho confidently responded that he had a plan for that. When he broke the final camera, it shattered into tiny fragments, ensuring there'd be no evidence. Beru observed with amusement, noting that Suho's approach reminded him of the monarch. Upon entering, Suho was struck by the eerie, blue mist filling the open dungeon. Beru explained that this mist was actually mana from another realm, seeping through dimensional walls and leaving a trail. The mist originated from the monarch's sanctum, filtering to earth through a dimensional rift. Beru continued, revealing that beings from the outer worlds were trying to tear a large breach between realms to send their armies through. Due to the dense concentration of mana required, only the weaker creatures could currently slip through, the strongest forces hadn't arrived yet. Realizing the urgency, Suho knew he had to level up fast, especially before other hunters could interfere. Suddenly, he glanced up and noticed colossal creatures lurking in the trees, a sharp-clawed Briga and a shadowy figure known as Ramon. Fang eagerly encouraged Suho to unleash his strength, but Suho replied that while he appreciated the support, he wouldn't use Fang as his main weapon, leaving Fang momentarily puzzled. Suho had decided to take a different approach, one he had thought through carefully. Instead of relying solely on weapons, he would integrate his training by using his fists for mid-range combat, with his monarchical powers as a backup. To keep his tactics versatile, he would swap weapons as needed, employing his extraction ability to gain more gear and further enhance his skills and attributes, leveling up independently. Hearing this, Beru was thrilled with the young monarch's determination and strategy. Fang recognized that this was the true power of the Shadow Monarch's bloodline at play. The more adversaries Suho faced and the longer a battle endured, the stronger he grew, drawing strength from the very demons and monsters he defeated. With his heightened intelligence, Suho realized he could now summon 5 shadows. However, Beru was quick to point out that it was a far cry from the mighty monarch, who could command thousands. Embarrassed, Suho told Beru to keep quiet. As they ventured further into the forest, Suho noticed a peculiar building in place of the Holy Land's gate Fang had mentioned. Fang explained that this was indeed where the gate was supposed to be, but now a strange warehouse stood in its place. Suho observed people still bustling about the area despite the late hour, wondering what was keeping them out here at night when hunting was typically safer during the day. Just then, a vehicle arrived, and several individuals were escorted out, their hands and legs bound. Realizing he was witnessing a kidnapping, Suho felt a surge of anger. Beru suggested caution, reminding Suho that, being here illegally, they would be vulnerable if these hunters realized they were trespassing. But as Beru finished his warning and turned, he found that Suho had vanished. Surprised, Beru wondered if Suho was seriously about to engage with those people. With a background of justice ingrained in him by his father, a dedicated police officer in violent crimes, and his legendary firefighter grandfather, Suho couldn't stand by idly. Acting on instinct, he dashed forward, closing the distance in an instant, and with a powerful kick, struck the nearest hunter, sending him reeling. The shadows watching were stunned by Suho's decisiveness. The other hunters, seeing their comrade taken down by a single, unexpected strike, were equally astonished. After the forceful kick, the hunter's face smashed into the ground, and the others only saw a fleeting shadow, the silhouette of Suho. The hunters couldn't immediately tell who had attacked, but Suho quickly assessed the situation, realizing that his body had reacted faster than his thoughts. Realizing he had unintentionally invaded another guild's territory, Suho wasn't entirely sure of his next move. He slipped on his shadow mask and turned to confront them, asking, are you seriously kidnapping people? What exactly is your guild, hyena, up to? The other hunters, surprised and angered, demanded to know why he was trespassing and attacking them without warning. They taunted, claiming he had sealed his fate by intruding, as they readied their weapons and began channeling their magic to retaliate. One of the hunters lunged toward Suho, but Suho skillfully dodged each blow. He recalled what he knew of the hyena guild. Their average strength hovered around D rank, so he resolved to stay on guard, not underestimating his opponents. When Suho struck one of the hunters, he put all his strength into the hit, sending the man flying through the air. The others watched, stunned by how swiftly their comrade had been thrown aside, and they could hardly believe what was happening. But Suho didn't hesitate. He moved on to the next hunter, taking them down one by one as they came at him from all directions. Beru, watching intently, was astounded, realizing that these D-rank awakened ones, who were fairly powerful by human standards, were now no match for Suho. Glancing at his status, Suho noted his progress. He had now reached level 16. Once the last hunter was subdued, Suho tied them up tightly to prevent any escape. Satisfied, he turned his attention to the people who had been bound by the guild and began untying them. As they were freed, they expressed their deep gratitude to Suho for rescuing them, while Beru, watching the aftermath, couldn't help but comment on the graceful way his young monarch had wrapped up the battle. The freed captives, uncertain but curious, asked Suho if he was part of the Hunter Association. He nodded and said they could assume so, instructing them to get to safety while he handled the situation here. Once they hurriedly got into their car and drove off, Suho lingered, puzzled about why the Hyena Guild would go to such extremes as to kidnap people. Just then, Fang's voice echoed in his mind, saying he could sense something nearby. Intrigued, Suho asked what Fang meant, and Fang hinted that this was the reason he had insisted on coming here in the first place. Suho and his companions moved toward a building on the other side of the fence. Entering the dimly lit room, Suho was taken aback by what he found. Rows of cages lined the walls, and a faint, strange energy filled the space, barely noticeable yet present. Beru pointed this out as well, though the source of the energy was difficult to pinpoint. As Suho scanned the room, his gaze settled on a small creature locked in one of the nearby cages. Initially, he thought it was a mere dog, but Fang quickly corrected him, suggesting that the creature was, in fact, a young wolf, a descendant of the legendary beast monarch, Fang. Hearing this revelation, Suho could hardly believe his ears. Fang then elaborated, explaining that after a brutal conflict with the Shadow Monarch, the beast monarch Fang had given the order for the last of his bloodline to be hidden in a shrine. He had hoped that one day, if his lineage survived, another Fang monarch might rise. Fang admitted that he hadn't expected to find a Fang descendant here of all places. Moved by the story and the little wolf's plight, Suho broke open the cage and gently lifted the wolf cub into his arms, feeling the faint traces of a noble aura that had suffered greatly and was almost depleted. Fang warned him that the young wolf's energy was so low it wouldn't survive if left in its weakened state. Beru then asked Suho what he planned to do next. Suho, eyes blazing with newfound resolve, muttered that while he had expected to find a few minor figures here, he now understood there was one last foe he would have to deal with. At that moment, Suho sensed a twisted aura. Turning, he spotted a demonic figure emerging from the shadows, its voice dripping with malice as it sneered that trust in others was a futile sentiment. The creature introduced itself as Broi and claimed to have survived by any means necessary. Instantly, Suho asked Fang if he knew this creature. Fang confirmed, explaining that this was the guard responsible for taking care of the descendant he had just described. Broi smirked as he approached Fang, sneering that it had been ages since they last saw each other and taunting Fang Rakan by mentioning how glad he was to see him still alive. Fang's expression grew darker, and he responded sharply, reminding Broi of his duty to protect the descendant. All this time, while this wolf cub was in chains, what exactly were you doing, Broi? Fang demanded, his voice thick with contempt. Suho held the wolf cub protectively, but before he could react, Broi lunged at him with blinding speed. With a menacing glare, Broi growled, "How dare you touch what's mine?" Without warning, Broi swung his tail, striking Suho with a brutal force that sent him crashing through the wall and into a pile of containers outside. Beru, witnessing the violent impact, flew to Suho's side, shouting out to see if he was all right. Dazed and wincing, Suho managed to grin despite his injuries, muttering, "That's the hardest hit I've taken in a long time. And yes, I'm bleeding, so please, Beru, stop yelling. My head's throbbing enough without the extra noise." Beru nodded, then looked toward Broi, narrowing his gaze. "I sensed a lingering energy when I arrived here," Beru said. "It's Iterim's energy, unmistakably connected to this one." His words caught both Fang and Broi's attention. Turning to Broi, Beru asked, "Do you realize what you've done to the monarch's descendant?" Broi interrupted with a twisted laugh, explaining smugly that his strength was no mere coincidence. Even after losing my sanctuary, I've grown strong by following nature's law of survival. The weak feed the strong, it's the way of the world, he declared coldly. This cub, though weak, carries the bloodline of the Fang monarch, making him an ideal source of power. Broi then admitted to draining energy from the young wolf periodically, using him as nourishment to amplify his own strength. After relishing his explanation, Broi fixed his eyes on Fang with a malevolent grin. When I'm finished here, he vowed, I'll be strong enough to eliminate you too, Fang. Mark my words. Suho raised his hand, calmly stating, death is merely the result of weakness, but Broi cut him off, sneering. Strength is the only law that matters. Only the powerful are fit to endure, he said, casting an assessing glance at Suho as he boasted about how the next Fang monarch would only respect strength. Seizing the moment, Suho lunged forward with his sword, delivering a fierce blow. At the same time, Beru swooped in, swiftly lifting the wolf cub from harm's way and retreating to a safer distance. As Suho's blade found its mark, it returned to his hand, poised for another strike. Glancing at Fang, Suho added, I thought you were upset with me. But right now, we're on the same side. I have unfinished business with this one, too. The tension between Fang and Shadow Clan felt almost tangible, but Suho's focus held. He continued, this battle may bring me closer to my father's trail. Just then, Suho's system chimed with a new assignment, an urgent hyena hunt, tasking him with stopping this threat and ensuring public safety. He connected the dots, realizing the true meaning behind the hyena guild's name. Broi wasn't simply another monster, he had founded an entire organization, kidnapping people to grow his influence, all intertwined with the same sinister energy linked to teetering. The hunters nearby, once loyal to Broi, struggled against their restraints. Broi, release us, they yelled. This guy isn't someone to face alone. Let us help. But Broi turned on his own followers in a heartbeat, silencing them with a brutal, dismissive blow. You think I need help with him? He snarled. The minute you forget your place, you become prey. Witnessing Broi's merciless strike against his own people ignited Suho's fury. He charged forward, fist clenched and ready to strike. As he launched his sword, Broi countered instantly, blocking with an unyielding grip. Suho demanded, did you slaughter those people just for amusement? Broi's response was cold. The strong need no reason. We decide who lives and dies, as we see fit. Broi followed with another powerful swing, but Suho managed to dodge just in time, shifting to the side and steadying himself, more determined than ever to bring down the monster before him. Launching himself into the air, Suho dove down at Broi with a fierce determination, his body descending like a storm. Mid-flight, he activated his recently acquired skill, Storm Blade, summoning gusts of slicing wind around his weapon. But as Suho's attacks rained down, Broi barely flinched. Smirking, he sneered, is that it? You're not even close to honoring the name of the Fang heirloom. Just then, a blade came whizzing through the air from a different angle, catching Broi by surprise as it sliced close to him. Suho, standing a few steps back, extended his arm, revealing his control over the flying sword. We're just getting started, he warned. Fang, watching closely, took the chance to question Broi. What happened to you? You once pledged loyalty to Rakan with such pride. Why betray that oath? Broi's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as he responded. Loyalty, he scoffed, letting out a cold laugh. There was never honor, only fear. I respected Rakan's power, nothing more. Living like that, shackled by fear, I couldn't bear it any longer. So, when the chance came, I decided to seize my own future by any means necessary. Broi caught Fang, and destroyed it. With a sudden burst of speed, he struck Suho with a devastating punch, sending him reeling. Suho felt pain tear through his body as if every bone were fractured, but his mind latched onto a powerful memory. Images of his father flashed before him, a figure battling somewhere unknown, never backing down. That memory rekindled a strength within Suho. It reminded him that surrender was not an option. Steeling himself, he summoned the shadows around him, cloaking his fists in shadowy armor. Channeling all his remaining strength, he launched a powerful blow straight into Broi, determination blazing in his eyes. Watching from a distance, Beru marveled at his young lord's resilience and power. Despite his age, Suho was wielding strength beyond what anyone expected. Fang, lying battered on the ground, glanced at his shattered sword and the memory of its former power. Everything, the survival of his descendants, the future of the Fang lineage, all rested on Suho's shoulders now. The fight wasn't over, it had only just begun. Fang could sense that Suho, just like him, was ready for the battle still to come. At that moment, the young wolf cub began to stir, slowly rising to its feet despite the strain and pain it felt. Fang Rakan watched, understanding that this cub, the last descendant of Lord Rakan, was summoning the strength to stand. Inspired by Suho's fierce determination, the cub struggled to its paws, its resolve mirroring Suho's own. Realizing what he had to do, Fang Rakan thought, the least I can do now is offer the remainder of my power to the next generation. As Suho continued his fight, each clash echoing through the battlefield, he barely held off his opponent's relentless onslaught. With a powerful strike, Broi sent him crashing to the ground. Lifting his head with difficulty, Suho noticed a system notification displaying his remaining hit points. The monster loomed closer, radiating an ominous aura and taunting, impressive endurance for such a lowly creature. Broi raised his arm to deliver a finishing blow, but suddenly, a sharp set of claws swiped across his paw. The young wolf cub had intervened, striking just as Broi was about to end Suho. Suho blinked, surprised by the wolf's sudden appearance and courage. Standing firm, the cub positioned itself protectively in front of Suho, its eyes blazing with determination. A notification appeared in front of Suho, showing that the Fang descendant had acknowledged his bravery and offered to join him as an ally. Suho hesitated, uncertain. Is this little cub really the descendant of the Fang? The monster, equally shocked, glared at the cub, snarling, is that truly a descendant? Has he absorbed the power of Rakan Fang? At that moment, Suho pieced it together. The cub had inherited the essence of Rakan Fang, who must have sacrificed himself to infuse his power into this young wolf. Suho had intended to align with the Fang from the start, and after a quick look at the system's notification, he decided there was no reason to hesitate. Accepting the Fang descendant as an ally, he confirmed the bond. Almost immediately, a new system window appeared, indicating that data synchronization was underway. Suho felt a strange influx of energy, memory seeping into his mind as if he were tapping directly into the wolf cub's past. The images formed into fragmented memories, an ominous cave, where Broi told Fang's descendant that they lost the war to Shadow Monarch and he must become stronger. Soon after, shadowed figures gathered around a small, trembling wolf cub. Among them, Suho saw beings vowing to challenge the powerful lord, declaring that the survival of the fittest ruled their world. The Fang clan member asserted that, no matter the risk, they would grow stronger to secure a future for their kind. As one figure extended a hand, the little cub cowered, and a creature laid a hand on the cub's head, transferring some mysterious energy while muttering, I choose you. Use this power wisely, it's a gift that will help you survive, depending on your resolve. The memory then shifted as Broi's sinister plot came into focus, his henchmen tasked with capturing people alive and delivering them to fulfill the monster's twisted purposes. The memories showed how Broi, fueled by power, fell further into darkness, and how the little wolf grew more fearful with every passing day. Witnessing the memories, Suho realized that these beings, who marked the wolf's mind with such fear, were somehow linked to the dark force of Iterim. The Fang descendants' motivations were clear to Suho now. The cub didn't simply want revenge on Broi but hoped to stop him entirely. Determined, Suho recognized that if Broi's actions were tied to Iterim, he had to end this here and now. But he knew he wasn't strong enough to do it alone, not yet. As if in response, the notification system updated, presenting Suho with a new quest, Monarch's Descendants Quest. The details urged him to find the Monarch's heirs and forge alliances with them. This would be the first step towards strengthening his position and securing allies in the battle against darkness. The Monarch's Descendants Quest demanded 8 alliances, with the first already forming through Suho's connection to Fang's lineage. As Suho acknowledged this bond, a vivid blue aura enveloped him, intensifying with each passing second. Beru, watching intently, noticed that his young lord was undergoing a transformation unlike any before. Meanwhile, Broi grew tense, bewildered by the strange surge of power emanating from Suho. Driven by desperation, Broi launched himself at Suho, intending to end it all in one decisive blow. He struck with such force that the ground around them began to crumble, sending shockwaves through the air. But just as Broi's blow landed, the system flashed another notification, confirming that a skill had awakened through Suho's bond with the Fang descendant. Suho had activated a level 1 beast transformation, a bonding skill that consumed 1 mana per second. This skill infused his body with the descendant's essence, enhancing his physical power and awakening heightened, animal-like senses. For a moment, Suho struggled to grasp what was happening. His body felt feather-light yet powerful, his senses keener than ever. The world around him seemed sharper, each detail vividly clear, and his movements flowed effortlessly as he instinctively avoided Broi's assaults. Then, in a sudden counterstrike, Suho unleashed a powerful kick, sending Broi reeling. Stunned, Broi struggled to process how this human, who had been on the defensive moments ago, now moved with such swiftness and strength. Enraged and confused, Broi roared, insisting he could not be losing to the same mere mortal he had dominated minutes prior. This power was supposed to belong only to him. He had fought, sacrificed, and clawed his way to the strength he wielded. In the background, Beru looked on in awe, sensing the drastic increase in Broki's magical aura. Furious, Broki spat, "I don't know what trick you're using, human, but I won't fall to the likes of you. Strength defines the right to rule, and you'll regret being born a weak creature of your kind." But Suho only narrowed his gaze, his new strength urging him forward, determined to prove Broki's arrogance would be his undoing. At this moment, Suho activated a new skill, quickly picking up techniques for hand-to-hand combat. Nearby, Beru's expression darkened in irritation as he overheard Broki, the beast, boast about the difference between their species. To Beru, nothing and no one stood above a shadow monarch, and this arrogant creature needed to be silenced. When Broki heard this, a flicker of doubt passed over him. Could this young human truly be a shadow lord? Before he could fully process this, Suho dashed forward and delivered a precise, unyielding kick, driving Broki deep into the earth. Yet even with his body battered and strength failing, Broki clung to his single-minded obsession. He had to keep getting stronger. Nothing else mattered. With fading vision, he glimpsed a familiar figure, Rakan, his master. Regret seeped in as Broki chastised himself for failing to protect Rakan, the one who had once entrusted him with so much. At last, the little wolf, recognizing his old friend's end, raised a mournful howl to the sky, saying his final goodbye to Broki. Suho observed the fallen Broki, a notification informing him that he had leveled up from the victory. He glanced over to see the little wolf gazing sorrowfully at Broki's lifeless form, saddened by the realization that he'd had to confront and ultimately lose someone who had once been his guardian. The silence was thick, and both Suho and Beru stood quietly for a moment, respectfully watching the somber scene unfold. Finally, Beru broke the silence, commending Suho for his strength and skill in taking down Broki. Suho, however, remained focused and asked Beru if he sensed any trace of Iterim's power lingering nearby. Suho shared that, through his bond with Rakan's heir, he had glimpsed troubling memories. He described a scene in which hunters had attacked Broki and the little wolf, inflicting a strange curse upon Broki's eye that had twisted his mind, turning him against his own. Could these hunters be agents of Iterim? Suho wondered aloud, his gaze darkening. And what could their real purpose be? Hearing this, Beru frowned and replied, "Iterim are the outer gods. These types don't involve themselves directly with mortal affairs. They send apostles to handle their errands and impose their will from afar. But one thing is certain, if hunters aligned with Iterim are acting openly here, then Earth is already part of their plans." Suho was still puzzled, desperate to learn more about Iterim. Beru, noticing his curiosity, suggested a way they might glean some insight into Iterim's secrets. Suho looked at him, surprised, as Beru explained, "If I devour Broki's body, I could access his memories, plus, I'd regain some of my powers. Think of it as getting two rewards in one." Suho, bewildered, asked Beru when he acquired this kind of ability. Then, he glanced at Rakan's heir, who was observing the exchange, clearly uncertain. Sensing the wolf's sadness, Suho knelt down and asked if he'd like to stay with him or if he preferred a different place. The young wolf initially hesitated, but when Suho smiled, the tension faded. The wolf bounded forward, nuzzling Suho affectionately, his eyes full of trust. Deciding on their next step, Suho pulled out his shadow dungeon key, opening a portal. "Beru, I'm counting on you to find information on Iterim," he said, motioning for Beru to handle Broki's remains. While Beru devoured Broki's corpse with enthusiasm, Suho led the wolf through the shadow dungeon portal, explaining that he wanted a safe haven for him. Beru chuckled to himself, wondering why Suho was bothering with the dungeon instead of just staying home. Inside the dungeon, Suho looked at his wolf companion, thoughtful yet concerned. This space belonged to the Shadow Monarch, and bringing in a creature connected to a different lineage might lead to complications. Beru raised an eyebrow, astonished at Suho's choice to house Rakan's heir in the Shadow Domain. Then, out of nowhere, a system notification appeared, indicating that the wolf wanted Suho to give him a name. Suho, taken by surprise, realized he'd never named anything before. But seeing the wolf's trusting gaze, he understood it would be an honor, and a responsibility, to give him a name worthy of their bond. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one.